what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chickie Bellis, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on Internet radio. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
It would help if I bring us back up onto the stage. Never start a show without a glitch. Anyway, you're here watching Southern Sense Live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, and our homepage, which is southernsense.net. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the radio chicken to you, Annie, along with my co-host, who is oh so tolerant, Curtis C.S. Bennett. It does help if I start the video, right?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I've been away for, 2 weeks now?
Yeah, it seems like forever.
I've had some great co-hosts, I believe.
Yes,
well, one showed up. Yeah,
one showed up. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with Josh, and we had great shows. Today we have two guests. It's questionable about the second guest, but Steve Gorham, you can find him at stevegorham.com, has a book out called Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And what I've been learning over the last couple of years, especially the last few months, is absolutely astounding where we're heading unless we do an about face real fast. So we'll be talking to him about that. And then Stephen Redden, he has a website called nowtaxusa.com, and he's got some idea of a broad-based tax system, some sort of a citizen's tax bill of rights that, but when I sent him the messages, he wasn't responding. So I don't know if something happened to him or not, but we'll have a great show anyway. That said, my goodness, the news has been hitting us left and right. Today, they have the congressional hearings on the attacks on President Trump on July 13th. And man, I wanted to throw something at the TV screen because the acting director, Rowe, is like, oh, we had no security lapses. We had them properly covered, blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy was there for 12 hours staking out his position.
No one did a perimeter check. Not even a drone in the air to check to see if there's anything out there. You know, you don't have to always expend human assets. We've got a lot of technology out there that could have done the job of someone walking the perimeter. We're talking about now the golf course in West Palm Beach. And there's also now coming out about the Iranians hacking into the Trump campaign, hacking into information that's not made available to the public, which would mean his schedule and everything else. So they're saying that the Harris campaign really didn't take any of the stuff. They didn't buy it. But what if these individuals who had wanted to attempt to assassinate Trump had that information, knowing exactly where and when, could explain why a rooftop was not covered, could explain why a perimeter was not checked. A lot of questions out there.
Yeah, this guy, he was on television the other day saying that, all of this technology and all, everything was present, but he didn't say it was operational
or deployed, much less deployed.
It was present.
Well, you've got
Could
the
have been
military
sitting in a
background.
box somewhere.
Yeah, you've got the military background. I've got the police background. And one of the things you do when you go to secure an area is check the perimeter. I mean, that's above and around and below. You check everything. I mean, I'm not one of those that was in the planning stage, but yes, there were times I worked the headquarters vehicle, and here all the communications came in from all different agencies into one central thing. Why was that over there in Pennsylvania? And what the heck was going on in West Palm Beach?
I'll tell you what, if you drive around Fort Knox one too many times, you're going to have a black van with the men in black following you. And they're going to want to know why you circling Fort Knox. So,
Absolutely. Anyway, let's move forward, because those that listen to the show know that we start off each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And let me see if I can pull it up. Here it is. Today's dedication is going to two It's Police Officer Michael Jensen of Syracuse PD and Lieutenant Michael Hoosock of I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this, Onondaga County in Sheriff's Office in New York. Their end of watch was April 14th of this year.
I'm Kate Lassiter. 23 years ago today, a group of terrorists made a series of attacks on America. Today is Patriots' Day, a day to remember the victims of the attack, to remember the first responders who sacrificed to save lives. Please stand as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance and pause for a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now please pause for a moment of silence.
The images of 9/11 are a stark reminder of the horrors of that day, but also the strength and resiliency of the American people. Watch as we present a solemn presentation of pictures from September 11, 2001.
We have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
There's a huge pall of smoke coming from that direction.
The numbers of those attacks affected by 9/11 are staggering, just like the health problems the victims faced and first responders faced for weeks, months, and years afterwards. Our reporter sat down with healthcare teacher and physical trainer Derek Subject to find out what health problems the victims and first responders suffered as a result of the attacks.
"3,000 people died and injured more than 6,000 others in the area. There were no survivors on the plane in which the event took place in. Since the attacks, airport security went up drastically, and they now question any suspicious characters.
A heartbreaking day in American history nearly 20 years ago. 4 terrorist attacks caused the collapse of the Twin Towers and damage to the Pentagon. While the impact has been felt all over the nation and the world, the immediate effects to the people around the wreckage have been devastating, so much so that they continue to affect Americans even to this day. Derek Subcheck, an athletic trainer and healthcare instructor at Alatoona High, reveals common diseases that plagued survivors of the attack.
The diseases that were going around at the time was more like upper respiratory infections, with all the dust and chemicals and pollutants and stuff in the air. People are having trouble breathing, getting asthma, so a lot of it was upper respiratory infections that were going on.
Research done the day of the attack showcases more specific information of the injuries suffered that day.
With a select group of people that showed that there's like 1,100 cuts, 200 burns, 80 fractures, dislocations, 69 concussions. But this was a small study of a group of a few thousand people that they surveyed that were there at 9/11. So that's some of the stuff they were experiencing on that day.
He informed us about the diseases they could contract and mentioned that many of them were long-term.
Going along with the research I was finding, right away people were experiencing psychological issues like PTSD. They were having traumatic issues such as breathing. There were some concussions going on, burns, fractures, dislocations. In the long term, it turned into more hearing problems, emphysema, high blood pressure, heart disease, PTSD, cancer, lung disease. In 2016, I found a study that said there were 5,400 cases of cancer that was linked to 9/11, and there's been a lot more since then.
9/11 was a tragic event that impacted millions of Americans. Must we never forget the people who helped save others and the victims on that horrible day in America. Reporting for The Anchor, I'm Jasmine Glenn.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the
All right, and we're back. You're here live listening to Southern Sense or watching Southern Sense. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the radio chickadee, Annie, along with my co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. We'll have a few minutes to go before we have our guest sign in. But I was talking about the Iran, the hacking of his campaign. And this was up in Newsmax just yesterday by Mark Swenson. And the question is as I make my notes on this, Republican president nominee Donald Trump told Newsmax just yesterday that unlike the Russian hoax that the teeth in straight, what happened to my speaking today? Dogged him in the aftermath of winning the 2016 election. Iran's hacking his campaign is real stuff, and he wants to know what's going to be done about it. And again, I question whether or not if Iran possibly had some connection with the two assassination attempts, were they sending them this information?
It's possible. I mean, Congress has asked the Justice Department and Homeland Security and all those other alphabet agencies to send them reports from the first assassination attempt, and they're still stonewalling Congress.
Right.
What are they hiding?
I know. That is the question. What is it that they're hiding? The emails contained an excerpt taken from stolen non-public material from former president's campaign as text in emails, according to a U.S. government statement. They said that no recipients responded to a Harris campaign official about whether or not the materials were used or not. We know that they're going to try to do anything and everything to keep him from coming into office, because Harris, Representative Harris, also was on Newsmax yesterday, and he said the left is very worried about former President Trump winning a second term, and that's the reason why they're trying so hard to assassinate him. This is Representative Andy Harris, a Republican out of Maryland. And he said, let me tell you something, the deep state in Washington and the liberal Democrats are very, very worried about a second Trump term. He was on the Chris Salcedo show. And President Biden said that you've got to put a bullseye on him. And that's exactly what they're doing to him.
Yeah, and these are the same people that says we have to tone down the rhetoric. I mean, who's calling this guy a threat to our democracy? Who's calling him a Hitler? It's not our side.
No. And they're talking about all this heavy rhetoric, but you're listening to all this stuff, and it is coming from the left. You weren't with us in the last show, and I was discussing Scott Jennings, CNN. Yeah, here's that article. Finally, someone on the left gets it and realizes the rhetoric coming from the left is what is damaging. He was talking about Vice President's campaign. Where I'm looking for this now. Oh, yeah. Trump, in his debate with Harris, was saying that the auto industry will have a bloodbath if Harris gets into office, meaning that she's pushing for these electric cars by 2030, blah, blah, blah. The auto industry already is taking a huge hit here in the United States with over-regulation, where some of them now being manufactured in Mexico and so forth. Ford moved their plant down there. We're having our auto industry decimated. And if we keep this with this administration and these policies, we're going to lose them. He means the jobs, the economy. He's not talking about a civil war, but it's a term, a phrase that everyone uses every day. You're watching a football game and you got one team that's far superior to the other, and you go, oh, why am I going to watch this game? It's going to be a bloodbath. I mean, you're not talking about someone actually going out and killing someone. It's a phrase, it's a term.
They know that, but for their low IQ constituency, they'll hang on to every word that's being put out there. And in the end, Um, what they get out of this is this man is a menace to society, and we have to stop him.
Yeah, and they don't understand either sarcasm because they keep on saying Trump's going to be a dictator on day one. Well, this was in a former town hall with Sean Hannity.
Yeah, he was kidding.
Yeah, he was actually kidding. He's saying, this is the excerpt. This was in December. Other than day one, we're closing the border. We're drilling. And after that, I'm not a dictator. Meaning on day one, he's going to close the border. It doesn't mean it's just a term, a phrase. It's sarcasm.
And they know
Same way that Biden on day one opened the border. Biden on day one overturned all of Trump's tax cuts. Biden on day one, does that make him a dictator then?
They are afraid of this man, and for good reason, because he knows where all the skeletons are, and he's going to expose them. And I think there's going to be consequences for what went down the last 4 years. And that's what they're afraid of. They're not used to, consequences. They get a little pat on the wrist, or it's overlooked overall. Say like Hillary and her her shenanigans with electronic equipment, bleaching it and cleaning and all that stuff, and she gets away with it.
Yeah. Oh, you mean BleachBit? That was the app that was used to wipe out all the data. So, what do you scrubbed it? What do you do? No, she's not that dumb. I'm sorry. She doesn't play dumb blonde very well.
And what about Al Gore? I don't know if you remember when he was vice president, he got caught with a lot of personal files in the White House that he had no business having. And what about that guy? I don't know, was it Sandy Berger or something that tried to stuff all the classified stuff in his pants? He got a pad on her, But let Trump have some classified documents that has every right to have because he is the president, and all of a sudden, he's mishandling classified information. Let's impeach him. Let's take him to trial. Let's adjudicate him.
We've got all those documents that Herb did the investigation into and interviewed Biden that, he was just a doddering old fool. This is the president of the United States. You don't want a doddering old fool as president. Well, I'm sorry. We do have a doddering old fool as president of the United States. I mean,
the way they cover up is, they don't even try to hide what their intent is anymore.
No. And I'm trying to remember if it was either Clinton or Obama that had classified documents that were questionable whether or not he should have had them in the top drawer of a bureau. I'm sorry, in a bedroom dresser bureau? That's where you place your confidential classified documents, not just lock and key and secure. And no one goes after him for that.
And, you got another point with that. Even though there were classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, they were protected by the Secret Service. The Secret Service people there. Who was guarding that garage at Biden's complex with
the Corvette was. It was the Corvette. The Corvette was on duty. With that said, let's bring in our next guest who's already cracking up going, the Corvette was guarding the documents in Biden's garage. Welcome, Steve Gorham. He's the author of a fantastic book called Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And Steve, I'm trying to remember where I was reading this, but just a few days ago, I was reading that as this administration takes away our renewable energies, our oil, gas, clean coal, nuclear, as he takes away these things from us, we are going to go into a massive energy failure because the United States is the largest consumer of electricity. And up to this point, we have been the largest producer. But if we go to all these green renewable energies, there's going to be a lot of people with absolutely no power. It's not sustainable. I was reading something like 400 I'm not a scientist, but I'm just trying to remember the article from the top of my head, like over 400 kilowatts or whatever it is, that enough to power several cities will be gone in just one small area. And then you multiply that by the rest of the United States. There's going to be a lot of wood burning stoves going back into operation, I think.
Hi, Ann. Hi, CS. Great
Hey.
to join you again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bring back the chimney.
We're about to enter a decade, I think we talked about before when I was on with you, of a big imbalance between electric power demand and electric power supply. And most of our political leaders don't understand. For the last 2 decades, we've had flat power demand in the United States. And during that time, they closed more than 200 coal plants, put in a lot of natural gas and a little bit of wind and solar. But now we have tremendous demand drivers, like a forced shift to electric vehicles, a forced shift to electric appliances. The government wants to create a green hydrogen fuel industry using electrolysis of water, which is hugely electricity intensive. But the biggest of all is the artificial intelligence revolution, which we have all the big guys, Microsoft and Meta and Oracle and Google, Amazon, building these huge data centers everywhere and getting big contracts. And the power grid guys don't know what to do. How can we provide enough power for everyone? And so this is going to be a decade of not necessarily outages, but just rising prices. They're going to stop shutting down. We're already seeing the restarting nuclear plants. They're going to stop shutting down coal plants and gas plants because we're not going to have enough power. And it's happening all over the country right now and in many parts of the world.
Well, people don't understand with artificial intelligence and the cloud. It sounds like this is up in the Ethernet. No, it's not. You need actual machinery to operate all the algorithms and whatever else that goes into it. I'm sorry, my computer coding goes all the way back to college when I learned on key punch cards. This stuff is a far blast from key punch cards. You remember the movie Do Not Fold, Spindle, or Mutilate?
But this is done in data centers now.
Yeah,
and these are exploding as well. We have at the start of the year we had about 2,500 data centers in the United States. And by the way, these are big multi-acre buildings that house all of these servers and computer processors. We had 2,500 at the start of the year. Now we're up to 2,900 in 9 months. And not only are they building more of them, they are upgrading them to do artificial intelligence. Now, today, the data centers consume about 4% of U.S. electricity. And this is for running the cloud, for running the internet. But now they want to use these to run artificial intelligence. And when you do that, you run these generational AI routines for weeks on end, 24 hours a day to make them try to think like humans and solve problems. And so when you upgrade a data center to do AI, it uses 6 to 10 times more electricity than it did just for cloud storage and for the grid. And so 4% of our electricity today is going into data centers. It's estimated that by a decade from now, it'll be 20% of U.S. electricity that will be used by data centers. And so the grid operators don't know how to handle this. Texas just, they had a peak of 85 gigawatts, and they're forecasting they're going to need 155 gigawatts by 2030. They have to more than double the amount of electricity they can put out. They don't have any idea how to do this. We have many other states in the same situation. So it's going to be kind of crazy, but it's going to stop the green movement in its tracks. There's just no way we can shut down the rest of the coal plants and shut down nuclear plants and still be able to do this.
Well, they're all pushing for, this solar energy, wind energy. If I remember correctly, it was maybe 2 major hurricanes ago. Puerto Rico was relying on this wind energy to supply the islands. Well, when the storm came through, they found out that didn't work too well because the hurricanes took out the wind turbines.
Yep.
And the island had no electricity for a long while, but they had no bridge between using, oh, good Lord, brain fart. I don't remember if it was oil-fired plants, but they had no way to bridge between the two. So when they lost power, no one was connected to the old plant. And when they wanted the old plant to work, there was nowhere to go. And it's a major mess up. I know
they didn't have
at that point,
redundancy.
the redundancy. Thank you. That's the word I was thinking of, because I remember following this because my mother was still residing in the Virgin Islands at that time. And I'm saying, thank God the Virgin Islands, not in Puerto Rico. But they don't understand what can happen when a major catastrophe happens, like a hurricane or earthquake. There's one thing when it happens to a power plant, but to these massive farms of solar and wind, they're destroyed.
Wind and solar are really, in many ways, the most unreliable sources we have. Not only are they intermittent, you only get about 15 to 20% of the electricity out of a solar, of its rated power on average. Wind, you get maybe 30 or 35%, but they're very vulnerable to what happens with the weather. As you pointed out, they want to build offshore wind all along the East Coast right now. And the hurricanes wiped out that wind that was on land in Puerto Rico. You get a big storm that comes up the East Coast, it's going to wipe out all these wind fields. We've had a big problem with hail recently. We had an entire solar facility destroyed. I believe it was in Kansas in June of last year. And you look at the pictures, and they had hail that was 2, 3, 4 inches, and it just wiped out all the solar panels. Similar thing happened in Texas in March. They had another big solar facility that was just wiped out by hail. So the Green Movement wants to put all these things in. They also say the weather's getting worse because of man-made warming, which is disputable. So what's the solution? We'll put in a lot of wind and solar. Does that make sense?
The second you said the temperature's warming up, I had a person I still run a tea party. I had a person at one of my meetings was complaining about the weather is warming up. And I said, well, did you realize on Route 21 coming into the main city, what used to be a huge cornfield, a huge working farm, is now a solar farm? And you notice, especially in that area, it's much warmer by a couple of degrees to the outside counties. And do you notice that when the storms come through, they seem to center around that solar farm? Where they're finding out that these solar farms actually become a vortex for storms. Wonderful.
Well, they may be. I haven't read that, but that may be the case. I think there's some papers that's saying that the amount of wind turbines we're putting up is actually reducing the wind around the world, which doesn't say much for the wind turbines. But you put up all this resistance, and the wind can't blow as strong as it used to.
Well, I really got into all this because Gregory Wrightstone is a friend of mine. And when he first came on the scene with his book, I was the first person to interview him. And I had him at my Tea Party meeting. And from there, he just exploded with the CO2 Coalition. I love him. So that's why there's so many different facts going on in my mind. But you have a couple of videos that you sent me that I played. And I want to play one of them because one of the things when I get into a debate with someone that's a greenie, they say, well, the planet's warming. It's getting too hot. It's getting too hot. There's too much CO2 in the air. But he doesn't understand the more CO2 in the air, the more we produce. And the more we produce, the more we produce starvation. I mean, corn becomes that sweeter. We can grow greater crops. And it's a plus to have CO2. But at the time that Christ walked on the world, geologists can prove it was far warmer than it is today. We're coming out of a mini ice age, and they just don't get it. And here is one of the videos that you sent me. It's going to play over our faces, so just forgive me on the technology here.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations has said the increase in temperature in the 20th century is likely to be the largest of any century during the past 1,000 years. So let me put temperature into perspective for you. I'm from Illinois, near Chicago. This is a graph of Chicago temperatures, or an encompassment of Chicago temperatures over the last 140 years for each day of the year from January 1st to December 31st. The bottom curve shows our record cold temperature for each day of the year. The top red curve shows the record hot temperature for each day of the year. And the gray bar in the middle is our average max and min. And our temperatures in Chicago go from about -5 for the coldest day in the winter up to about 95 Fahrenheit for the hottest in the summer, a swing of about 100 degrees Fahrenheit every year. So I'm going to superimpose on this the amount that global temperatures have risen in the last 130 years. There it is. It's captured within the thickness of that black line. Folks, that's what climate scientists tell us is a catastrophe in the making. Yet we have this climate mania. These headlines are all from a single day last year. Washington Post, dozens dead in Japan from an extreme heat event. Bloomberg, climate change is disrupting our seasons. USA Today, human fingerprints on Earth's temperature changes. CNN, evacuations ordered in Sweden from forest fires. The New York Times, beauty and bleakness, efforts to conserve coral reefs. Vietnam warns of floods, tropical storm hits. And my favorite, the New York Times, these birds are racing to their mating grounds. It's exhausting. So let me get this straight. We're supposed to believe that the floods, the dying polar bears, the rising oceans, the forest fires, the storms are all caused by 1 degree of temperature rise in 130 years? Because that's what all the major temperature metrics from NASA, NOAA, and the Climate Research Unit in England tell us.
Love it.
You're right. When Christ walked the earth, they had a period called the Roman warming. And the geologic evidence said it was 1 or 2 degrees Celsius warmer than today during those periods. About that time, they were growing olives in central Germany 2,000 years ago, which they can't do today. And there are oceans of evidence to say that we have multiple century-long periods in the last 10,000 years when it was warmer than today, despite what you read in the press.
You know, you mentioned polar bears, and this again is one of my favorite topics. And they're saying that the polar bears are dying, but yet when we had the oil pipeline, the Alaska pipeline going, the heat that pipeline generated attracted wildlife. And it was a great hunting ground for the polar bears. Matter of fact, they were prospering because we had a pipeline there. The wildlife was prospering. And yet now we shut down the pipeline and, well, yeah, we can blame Biden and Obama on the polar bears dying, right?
We have had a general warming over the last, about a degree the last 150 years, 140 years or so. But the polar bear populations have been growing since 1970. We have more than twice as many polar bears as we had in the 1960s. Actually, about 3 times as many. I think we had about 10,000 on the surface of the earth. Now it's almost 30,000. And the big reason is that the northern nations got together and said, we're going to put hunting restrictions on humans, Canada and Russia and the Scandinavian nations, the United States. And so we're not shooting so many bears anymore. Now they have many, many bears up there. So there's no indication that the polar bears are declining in anybody who has serious data.
Well, I'm going to tell you what frustrates me is the fact that we have people in our leadership, for instance, like Al Gore, that would put out there that the ice caps will melt by 2012. And then they just disappear off the scene and you don't hear from them anymore. And the ice, actually is increasing up there in the Arctic and Antarctica. But they're never held to account for what they say.
Right. We had about 2008, Mr. Gore predicted that in the summer, Arctic ice would be gone by 2014 or 2012, as you say. Yeah. But it didn't happen. And there have been many, many predictions like that on the United Nations website in 2005. They said there were going to be 50 million climate refugees. And then within the next 10 years, they took that off the website in 2010 because it wasn't happening. Many, many past predictions. And I capture that in all 4 of my books, all these crazy climate things that have been talked about, but just don't occur.
You know, what amazes me, they put so many restrictions now on opening these power plants, you know, oil, coal, and so forth. They have so many restrictions that it's not even cost effective. By the time they get through decades of permitting and approval and this and that, you know, we were supposed to have a couple of plants open here, nuclear plants in South Carolina.
Yep.
But by the time they got through it, and we were paying for this on our bills. And when they decide, well, it's not worth it, they shut them down. And we're still stuck with paying a bill for something that wasn't built.
That's especially true in the case of nuclear plants, a huge number of restrictions. I met a guy at the Plastic Pipe Institute who sold plastic pipe into a number of industries, including nuclear plants. And he said, when I sell some pipe to a typical customer, there's about a 1/4 inch of paperwork. If I sell to a nuclear plant for a single, set of pipe, it's like 3 inches of paperwork they have to fill out. So there are a tremendous amount of restrictions, really overboard. And as a result, unfortunately, nuclear is very expensive nowadays to build nuclear plants compared to natural gas or other forms of electricity generation.
You know, I remember 3 Mile Island, which was upstate New York. And I was living on Long Island. And at that point, they were building one in Westbury to cover Long Island. And it was a fantastic plant. I mean, it was a great plant. But everyone was nuclear, we're going to have another 3 Mile Island. But the technology has advanced that something like that happening is minuscule.
Well, I would also add to that. We have nuclear warships. I was on one, and they operated without any incidents, no nuclear fallout or anything. And these nuclear carriers have been in operation for decades.
Yeah, there are. If you really look at people that have been killed in a particular industry, nuclear is at the bottom. There's very low amount of accidents and injury and all that. By the way, do you know the latest news is they're going to restart one of the 3 Mile Island nuclear plants? Not the one that had the meltdown issue, but they had a second plant that was closed in 2019, and they're going to restart it because Microsoft wants the power to do AI. It's just been announced recently. And they're also restarting a nuclear plant in Michigan, the Palisades plant, which was shut down in summer of 2022. But these are indications that we don't have enough power, and we're not to serve AI and all these needs. And so they're trying to restart all these facilities. And again, we're going to have an imbalance for about a decade here.
So we're looking at a waning, interest in renewable energies. So now what are we going to do with all these wind farms and solar farms? Now, solar panels are toxic materials. It's not something like you break a mirror and then you can throw it in the garbage. These things contain toxic materials, and they're so green about energy, but yet the very items to produce this green energy are toxic.
Well, they can put them in landfills. Most of our landfills nowadays are lined to present metals and things from leaking out. But recycling is a big problem. As you mentioned, in California right now, they have a lot of solar panels that are nearing end of life. They've been on roofs for 20 years. And so what do they do with them? Well, the statistics are not good. To recycle a typical solar panel costs about $25. If you try and recycle it, you get about $4 of material out. So that doesn't break even at all. And then if you send it to a landfill, it only costs about $2. So what's everybody going to do? They're going to send these to a landfill. And more and more of these wind turbine, these solar panels, and it affects wind turbine blades that are very expensive to recycle. Electric car batteries are another one. We're going to have these things piling up. By the way, these big batteries, the car batteries only last 7 to 10 years. And they're putting in these grid scale batteries that are huge, 100 times the size of a car battery. And those things, after 10 or 12 years, you have to recycle those also. So a big problem with all these renewables is you have a huge amount of waste, which you don't have with other plants.
You know, going with typical energy things we had, coal, oil, gas, nuclear, it was less damage to the environment than these renewable energies, which it just completely negates the purpose of green energy. And it always amazes me. You mentioned the batteries, and you sent me an excellent article also. This was on the Riven Truck Factory in Normal, Illinois. I love that name, Normal, Illinois. But we also saw this when the hurricane recently came through Florida. People with these lithium batteries that were parked in their garage, once water contacted them, there were massive fires all over the place. These batteries are dangerous.
We have a new global epidemic, and it's not a version of COVID. It is a lithium battery fire epidemic. We're having lithium fires break out all over the world. We've always had a little issue with lithium batteries in cell phones. If you go on the airline, they don't want it in the baggage, that sort of thing. But those are small batteries. So a car battery is about 1,000 times as the size of the battery in your smartphone. And now they want to put in these big batteries on the grid that are yet hundreds of times bigger than car batteries. And as you say, we're having these huge fires. Normal, Illinois, at the Rivian heavy truck plant in Normal, they had a bunch of these electric trucks sitting out in the parking lot. One of them caught fire, and it exploded in flames, and it burned up a total of 50 trucks around it. They were just sitting in the parking lot, all with a big lithium battery fire. This happened about 2 months ago, and it's just one of many, many fires that are breaking out all across the world right now. But governments seem to be doubling down. We got to keep going with more and more lithium batteries, and regardless of what's going on with the fire situation.
Well, this is the thing. The lithium battery, when it does burn, you can't douse it with water. You have to use a special foam to douse it. Now, we're finding with the hurricane that would have hit Florida, a lot of these cars, when they were flooded, the batteries would explode. And I had a friend of mine, his neighbor had the car in the garage, it exploded, and it damaged his house. He had to leave. He had to find a new place to live. It took out his house. My husband wanted to buy a golf cart with lithium batteries in it. And I'm like, I don't think so. I really don't think so.
Yeah, some authorities speculate
I want a gasoline one.
I don't know. I don't know if it was Flight 800, whatever flight that was that got destroyed in midair over New York. Some speculate that it was lithium batteries in the storage area. So what they did was they stopped the storage of lithium batteries on passenger planes. They have to be on cargo planes now. So I think that was Flight 800. I'm not sure.
They are a bigger problem. So here's a question for your audience. What's the biggest source of fires in New York City?
Oh, you mean the city buses?
No, it isn't buses, and it's not smoking, and it's not cooking. It's e-bike lithium battery fires now. They had more than
yes,
from
I heard
electric
that.
bikes. They had more than 200 of them last year in New York City, and they've just skyrocketed over the last 4 or 5 years. And people put these e-bikes in the downstairs storage closet or in the garage.
Wow!
And the things just explode, either by themselves or if they're on a charger, and then the whole building goes up. They also had 55 fires in Toronto last year from e-bikes. They're having fires all across Australia. And part of the problem is people buy cheap e-bikes, and maybe they're not so up to spec. But even if you get real high quality e-bikes, if they get damaged, if the battery gets damaged in any way, if it gets bumped or collided with, or it's put on a charger that isn't very good, then it becomes a fire hazard as well. But just another example of problems with these e-bikes.
Well, now our government has been gearing everything towards green energy, all their regulations and everything, which is, as we spoke earlier, inhibited any building of plants and products because they have to jump through so many hoops, which is why the internet technology is booming, because there's no regulations on that. It is a free market out there, whereas normal production here in the United States has been so stagnated by overregulation. So it's costing us. Do you see a reversal in any of these policies and regulations coming about to open up our economic market coming soon? Or are we heading on a downward slide? Is there enough public opinion to reduce these regulations and allow our economy to regrow, and just not in the technology, bring our economy equal technology and production?
Well, right now we have the government's doubling down. We have 23 states that have zero emissions electricity mandates by 2050. And that is, they want to go to all wind and solar and quit using coal and natural gas. We have 22 states that have zero emissions vehicle mandates, and most of those are by 2035. They want to force everybody to buy electric vehicles. And we also have an administration that's supporting all of this. The next elections are going to be very, very important. But I think people are going to push back on this. You know, in California right now, it's off the deep end. If you run your air conditioner in Southern California for a month, it costs you $1,000 in electricity. Electricity has gone up 50% in California in the last 3 years, and it's going to go up much, much more. And then you can't get insurance in California for your home. A big part of that is the forest fire problems they're having, and we could talk in depth about that.
Oh wow, yeah.
But for all these renewables, you have to build 2 or 3 times as much power transmission as for a traditional plant. For one nuclear plant, you need about 10 solar facilities to equal the same amount of power. So you have to build transmission out to all these places. And the transmission are causing fires. So everything they're doing in this green push is causing people's electricity rates to rise, making it so they can't get insurance, raising the price of housing. And I think people are just going to revolt. We're going to have a ratepayer revolt in California and a number of other places. They're going to say, hey, enough of this stuff. Let's get back to, and that's what the green breakdown is about. Let's get back to low-cost, reliable energy.
You know, I installed myself. I was going to ask a question here. I installed myself a Generac, which runs off of propane. I heard they were going to try to now regulate and restrict how much propane and natural gas you can get now. Is that true?
Yeah, in some states, New York, for example, has a ban on that starting in a year or two. But CS, you had something you wanted to get in.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if we had any insight or data on how Europe is approaching green energy. Are they as aggressive at this as we are, or they're kind of like, you know, a wait and see how things, you know, pan out with green energy?
Well, Europe has been the most aggressive in the world, putting in all sorts of laws, but now we're starting to see them have a step back. You know what happened in August? Electric vehicle sales in Germany were down 70% from the previous year. They were down 44% in France from the previous year. Europe now is down like 42% on electric vehicle sales. But they have all these mandates on the car manufacturers. Very shortly, the car manufacturers are going to be fined if they're not selling all these electric vehicles. And they found a way to destroy their automobile industry in Europe. But we do have Europe stepping back. Netherlands and Germany have postponed bans on gas appliances. They want everybody to use heat pumps and electric appliances. Netherlands, Germany, and France were telling their farmers to reduce the size of their dairy herds because they emitted methane, right, a global warming agent, to stop using nitrogen fertilizer for their crops. And the farmers drove tractors into the cities, blocked all the cities in Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, and they stepped back on that. And now we've had a whole bunch of gains by conservative groups in Europe that are opposing the green climate agenda. So I think we're going to see a breakdown in Europe coming along here fairly soon.
Yeah, I was hearing about that, restricting farmers and on the size of their herd, whether it's sheep or cattle, because of methane gas. But I'm sorry, any flatulence produced by a creature is going to maintain methane gas. So what are they going to do? Put a methane gas upon our own, you know?
Well, they want to, they'll
tax it.
Sometimes they show a picture. a picture of this experiment in South America. They put a big plastic bag on the back of a cow with something to catch the gas from the cow. It was kind of crazy, but this is all goofy. Methane is another example. Methane in the atmosphere. Methane is has a very high what they call a greenhouse factor in the laboratory. It produces a lot of it captures a lot of infrared radiation, and so it would be high in the greenhouse effect. But in the atmosphere, methane is saturated. And so adding more methane, natural gas to the atmosphere has almost no effect. It's sort of like painting your house. If you're painting a room in your house, nobody puts more than 2 coats of paint on because you really can't see any difference. And that you don't put 10 coats of paint on, it wouldn't make any difference. That's what methane's like in the atmosphere. It's already saturated. So if we even double the amount of methane in the atmosphere over the next 50 or 100 years, it wouldn't have any effect. It'd be almost unmeasurable. But these things are never explained. People say, "Wow, methane's bad in the lab," and so we've got to take everybody's cattle away, and they can't be putting fertilizer on their lawns.
I mean, the crazies just get crazier and crazier. I had so many things here to talk to you about. We're looking at also something I pulled up that a friend of mine who wrote an article, or rather he sent me the article, that there's now major land grabs by the government to prevent people from actually building or farming. So this is another attack on our attempt to be economically free, but yet they're saying, hey, listen, no, right now, let me see, here we go, pull up some of this stuff. The Antiquities Act of 1906 has now taken over 400,000 acres in Colorado. It would limit among future oil and gas leases, mining claims, right-of-way, utility infrastructure. Mining and ranching and farming are the mainstay of the economy there. But here you have the possibility of uranium mining and everything else. So our government is preventing us from producing the very things to make energy efficient and inexpensive.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, for a long time, much of the West is owned by the federal government. And I think the government owns far too much land. The government really should be selling it back, trying to reduce the national debt, and that sort of thing. And
it's right now
a big issue.
It is now up to 40% is government owned in the land of the United States. That means our freedom is restricted to only 60% of the United States.
Well, it's getting to be a big problem. We have way too much government in many, many ways. By the way, you know what they're doing now? They're actually seizing land for green energy. They're using eminent domain in Iowa. The Utilities Board approved that Summit Solutions, who wants to build carbon dioxide pipelines throughout Iowa and 5 other Midwest states, has the right to seize land from farmers to put in these pipelines so that we can ship carbon dioxide all over the place. The U.S. Department of Energy wants to do a similar thing for transmission. They want to use eminent domain to take land from people to put in power lines because they have to build all this transmission for wind and solar. So, we should get back to, originally eminent domain was used just for government facilities for public land, but not for private groups like Summit Solutions. But that, they got to take your land now to do green energy. That's how far we've gone down this road.
The eminent domain, if I remember correctly, because I was living in New York at the time, started with a fight with a woman that would not let her property go to eminent domain because they wanted to put a shopping mall in the area where she lived. So everyone else gave up their homes and said, all right, fine, you give us a price, take it over. She says, no, I've lived here. My family's been here for centuries. I'm not leaving. And it became an eminent domain fight where they tried to take her house to put in a shopping mall. Bridgehampton, I believe it was Bridgehampton. I'm not sure. I forget. I can just remember it was across the Long Island Sound for where we had our cottage. And in the end, they never built the mall. But that is where they broke the eminent domain. And then from there, it seems like any government project that you stand in the way in, eminent domain is used. Matter of fact, I'm fighting my own county council because they want to use eminent domain for all these public projects like sidewalks and things like that in areas that you don't need them. But they said, if you don't give us your property, we're going to use eminent domain. I've got a friend of mine fighting that because I want to put a roadway right through his property that has been his family for generations. And he says, no, give me a fair price. Maybe I'll sell it to you. Well, we're going to take it eminent domain. It's been abused.
Yeah, there's some need for it, I think, but it is going overboard. And my big problem is that, to push carbon dioxide pipelines and things like offshore wind and all this other sort of thing, which really is foolish anyway. We're not going to have any effect on the climate with all of this. But we've got to go take all this land. So just the wrong tool.
Well, now I've got a question because this always bugged me. They're capturing all the CO2 and they've got these power plants that have to have these scrubbers on it to pull the CO2 out. What do they do with it? Where does it go? How do they store it? How do you store something that you can't see?
Well, all that is very experimental right now. Now there are about 45 major carbon dioxide capture and storage plants in the world, but they take a lot of that and they re-inject it underground to force oil and gas up to the surface. But there are other
we can't use oil and gas anymore, right?
Well, that's what the environmentalists say. And then there are other projects where they want to take it, put it through pipelines and just stick it underground and hopefully it'll stay there. But it's very, very expensive. It wouldn't exist without a lot of government money. There's no market for CO2. We have plenty for soft drinks and other things. Again, it's another industry that would not exist without the fear of man-made global warming.
Well, now, isn't this all about the dollars? It's all about the Benjamins. They're making a multi-billion-dollar industry on something that is false.
Much of it, yep. The subsidies are big deals. So again, as I say in recent articles, these things would not exist in a competitive capital market without the fear of man-made warming and without all this government money.
Well, now, you sent me an article about Washington State and Washington State Climate Commitment Act. What is that about and what's going on over there over this?
So Governor Inslee, Jay Inslee, during his term, passed a Climate Commitment Act that requires businesses to pay for carbon dioxide emissions. But what it is doing is raising the cost of gasoline, raising the cost of energy and other things all across Washington State. And it's just the residents have an opportunity to vote that down this November 5th. They've signed petitions, they're all set, and they really should vote that down. And because right now Washington State has gotten to be the third highest in gasoline prices in the country, third highest in diesel prices behind California and some others. Just not a good thing. It's not going to have any effect on the climate, but it's just raising their prices. So hopefully they will go against Governor Inslee and vote down this act.
Yeah. Now, you also sent me a chart about the world natural gas consumption. And I found this interesting because the media keeps on saying natural gas is bad. It's going to cause more pollution. But yet we find the exact opposite is true.
We do. And, sometimes I ask audiences which source of energy has done the most to reduce air pollution in the last 50 years. And the answer isn't wind, it isn't solar, it's actually natural gas. My grandfather, when he lived in Chicago in the 1950s, had a coal furnace in his basement, and many people did. And after 4 or 5 days, the snow that had fallen on the ground would be blackened by a film of black coal dust. You could literally see it. And then every spring, what spring cleaning was for in those days, people would wash down the inside of all their walls to remove the coal dust. But then we had people convert to natural gas. And if you convert from either burning wood or burning coal in your home to natural gas, you reduce the particulate matter inside by a factor of 1,000. Your air is very much cleaner. And so natural gas has really done a great thing to reduce pollution, despite what you hear in the press.
See, now, again, living up in New York, growing up in there, we were accustomed to oil, those huge furnaces in your basement. That probably about the size of my desk right here, a little bit larger if I remember correctly. So is oil also cleaner than what they're doing?
Well, it's cleaner than coal and wood, but gas is cleaner than oil. Burning oil puts out particulates as well. But
I,
that's the short answer on that.
Well, I'm going through all my notes here on you, and I, like I said, I've got a whole big bunch of them. You know, as you can see, all my notes all over the place. So you see papers shuffled. But now, this whole big green push didn't start until we had the huge Arab oil embargo, and that's when people started going, well, what's the alternative to oil? So I think that is the point where someone saw the dollar bill there and say, well, how can I make buck off of this? And then it just spiraled, hasn't it?
Well, as I talk about in Green Breakdown, that was one of the drivers for green energy was the oil crisis in the 1970s. People wanted to move away from the use of oil. We also had an environmental movement. We had an environmental movement in those days that we wanted to clean up the air and water. And so those are the first things that were pushing wind and solar and other things. But the third big driver, of course, is the fear of man-made warming, which came into place. By the way, we thought for many years we were going to run out of oil and gas. President Jimmy Carter got on the TV in the 1970s and said, we're going to run out of oil and gas. And but it didn't. We're producing more and more and more. We had the fracking revolution. But now the big driver, and by the way, pollution is way down. So we're not running out. Pollution's way down. The big thing driving renewables now, of course, is the fear of human-caused warming, which again, that is not based on sound science. That's going to disappear as well over the next few decades.
Well, you're talking about global warming. As I said, we are climbing out of an ice age. But the warmer our planet gets and the more CO2 we do admit to it, we become a lusher planet. We produce more vegetation. I mean, it makes us healthier and warmer. But if you look at historically, every time we had a warming trend, that's where the human population migrated and civilization grew. When it grew cold, you're contained, you're inside your home, you want to stay warm, you don't get out, you don't migrate, you don't exchange, civilization shrinks. So we're doing the exact opposite. We're trying to shrink civilization, or are we trying to grow civilization?
The warmer periods are better for people. That's all the way it's always been. Less disease, less death, and people move. They don't move to Alaska to retire. They move to Florida or Texas or Arizona. Warm climates are better. So, despite what the global warming movement says.
Well, you also mentioned wildfires, and kind of like glossed over it, but having driven through areas that have had wildfires, back in the 80s and 90s, I looked into it back then. And I said, well, we used to have a forestry service, and the forestry service would turn around and go into areas of forestry that was overgrown. We had a possibility if someone dropped a match, you would start a fire, and they would do a clean burn, but they wouldn't disturb the forest. All they would do was just remove from there what would have caused a wildfire. But we stopped doing that. The forestry department has stopped. What was they called? Backfire, they called it? I forget what they called it. Brain farts.
Well, you're right. There are maintenance fires that can be done. And for many years, we stopped. The Hoover Commission published a report in 2018 on fires in California. And California in the last decade has had half of the worst fires in its history in terms of property damage. But the Hoover Commission pointed out that for about a century, we've been suppressing fires in the western forests in California and other places. And they also said that fire is a way that forests stay healthy, to have natural forest fires. And also the forestry in California is down about 60%. From the 1990s. So they're just not taking out as much trees. Then the U.S. Forest Service estimated there were 140 million dead trees in California. This was also in 2018. And so what happens is when you get these fires, you just can't put them out. They have so much fuel. They have forests that are choked with dead trees and brush, and they just burn and burn and burn. So you have these terrible fires. So what California is now trying to do is do some of these control burns, clear out the fires, and stop these terrible fires they're getting. By the way, if you look at NASA data, NASA uses satellites to look down on the surface of the Earth, and they report that globally the burned area has been declining for the last 20 years. global burned area from fires is down about 20%. And so then you got to ask the question, well, why are fires rising in California from climate change if they're declining globally? Doesn't make much sense. So the key here is forest management, not trying to control global temperatures.
Well, people always bring up the wildfire in Hawaii, and Hawaii at that point, a lot of their agricultural industry had been destroyed. It used to be the capital for growing pineapple, and because of that, the plantation owners maintained the area around it and made sure no invasive species got in there that could have harmed the plantation and harmed anyone else. Well, what happened was when they turned around and a lot of these pineapple plantations went to south of the border, invasive species came in there that were not natural to Hawaii, and therefore they were ripe for when the power plant line dropped into it and started the wildfire.
That may be the case. You're talking about the Maui fire. I really don't know the details on that, so I'd have to just agree with you on that.
Well, I was trying to point out that good husbandry of our planet, such as maintaining your plantation or preventing invasive species from coming in, doing the forestry work with the wildfire controls of the forest and everything else, it's important. But then again, the greenies harp on the fact they destroyed what we were doing to maintain a healthy planet.
Well, that may be the case. There's a lot of things that are wrong about the green movement.
Well, they've been going after our gas stoves with natural gas. Now, I heard that the federal government was going to restrict sales of gas stoves. I was just having mine installed. Yeah. But it has gotten to the point where they're regulating the type of toilet, the light bulbs we can use, and now stoves. It is getting to the point, over-government regulation in hand with this green economy is going to be destroying our freedom here.
We do have, as you mentioned, the federal government, they put restrictions on the efficiency required in stoves. They haven't directly tried to ban. We do have 7 states that have banned gas appliances in new construction. And now these aren't necessarily the state itself, but counties and cities. About 10% of the cities in California have banned gas in new construction. The only state that has banned gas appliances is the state of New York. As of 2026, you won't be able to build a building with gas appliances. You have to use electric. But the interesting thing, and these 7 states get all the headlines, but what people don't know is there are 24 states that have passed laws saying that Mr. Mayor or Mr. County Commissioner, you can't pass an ordinance that bans gas appliances in your county or city. So we really have a war going on over gas appliances in the United States. And right now, 24 states are forcing cities and counties not to try and stop them with local laws.
Well, we're talking about all this stuff with renewable energy.
One thing I've learned here living in.
Go ahead, Curtis. Curtis?
Oh, okay. One thing I've learned here and living in Florida. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, we got you.
Can you hear me?
You're loud,
yeah,
loud and clear. You're loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Living here in Florida, when we have hurricanes and when we have major power outages, the people who can cook through these storms and blackouts are the people who have gas ranges, not electric. And that's the benefit of having a gas stove. If the grid goes down, you can still heat your food.
It is good to have a little diverse supply, both gas and both electric and a gasoline car as well. And we have a government that seems to want to take away your gasoline car, force you to have an electric, take away your gas appliances, force you to have electric. And then, if you have a power outage, you can't do anything. You can't cook, you can't heat your home. There was a time when I was a kid, I lived near Chicago. We had electricity outage for 3 days when I was young, and it was in the middle of winter. And so we ran our gas stove to warm the house for 3 days. You wouldn't be able to do that if you're forced to have an electric stove. So you're right. We need a little bit of diversity. I think it helps in the case of a disaster. It keeps you in better shape.
Well, yeah, I lived through the great blackout of the 1960s. That's when all the babies were born afterwards. But, maybe that living through that as a little kid made me want to always have a backup. So when I purchased my home here, we made sure we had a gas-powered generator. And we had our charcoal grills going. When we hit with Hurricane Matthew, our house was one of only 2 houses on our entire street that had any power. We were feeding our neighbors because we were able to cook. We had the TV going because we had the gas generator going. But, people don't realize what would happen if the grid goes down. And we're talking about all this green energy and bringing back our power plants, but we're also being very vulnerable to either an attack or a freak act of nature to knock down the power grid. And renewable energy is not going to be the answer, is it?
Well, you're right. Texas is another example. In February of 2028, power was off.
And just to take this.
Go ahead.
Curtis, we lost you again.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in the wintertime, electricity go down. In the wintertime, if the electricity goes down up north, those people are going to freeze. How are they going to stay warm?
Yeah, you're right. I think we have a big looming problem in New England. New England has a shortage of natural gas. The state of New York has blocked gas pipelines for many years. And if they have a really cold winter, they're going to run out. It's going to be a big problem. So I think you're right.
Well, your book is great. It's The Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure, where you give a lot of information like this, the statistics and everything, so people can understand the path we're going through. We can't give up on drilling for oil and fracking, offshore oil drilling. I've been fighting my own state when they turned around and says, well, we're not going to allow any offshore drilling. I'm like, wait a minute. Those platforms end up becoming a natural reef for fish. And it actually increases your tourism and fishing industry by having them out there. And then you pipe the oil in, you create another industry along the shoreline where the oil workers and their families end up living. You'll need schools and stores and restaurants and things like that. You increase your economy, you increase wildlife. The Gulf of Mexico had, I believe it was it the red bass? They had none. And now when they had the oil platforms go in and drill in the Gulf, all of a sudden they became the major source of bass. I mean, it's a win-win, but yet we're told, oh no, you're killing the environment. The world is going to be destroyed in the next 5 years.
Well, they can be a good natural reef. Yeah, the thing we need to do is reduce dangerous pollution. Carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, those sort of things in the air, discharge of untreated water into rivers and streams, which we don't do much in the U.S., but around the world, that's a big issue. Let's reduce those pollutants. The idea, though, that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, that's just completely false. As Greg Wrightstone says, let's get back to what really matters for the environment, and not this foolish quest to try and control the temperatures of the earth.
I mean, there's so much more to talk about and going into this. That's why your book is so good, as well as going to Gregory's website, the CO2 Coalition. People can find you at stevegorman.com, where they can get your books and look at the videotapes of your speeches and what you do, and look at all the graphs to prove that green energy is not going to be the answer to our future. It may be a part of it. And one of the things that we're finding, there was a recent article in the paper, because I'm thinking about the oil platforms and the wind turbines out in the water. They're finding that there's stranding of a lot of whales and dolphins and species that are around those. The vibration is causing a break in their natural cycle. We're also finding that if people live near one of those wind turbines on land, it is causing psychological adverse effects. So all these green things that are supposed to be helping us are actually in the end harming us.
In some cases, it can be. Yeah, they found some issues with vibrations and a problem with whales off the coast. But Green Breakdown has not only does it have the facts and figures, but it's a lot of fun as well. There's 150 color sidebars. I also hired a cartoonist to do a cartoon in front of each chapter. But there's some, and it's got all these crazy climate stories about, like the I think it was a Miami newspaper that said that climate change causes couples to cheat on each other.
Oh,
so,
so that.
So now you have an excuse, honey. Global warming made you do it. Or you have the Swedish professor that is urging people to eat human flesh to stop global warming, and he literally polls his audiences to see how many are willing to try human flesh. That's crazy. There's a cosmetic surgeon in Southern California that was taking tissue from his patients, and he was making vehicle fuel out of it. He actually was prosecuted for that. But so Green Breakdown has all these headlines of crazy things people are doing to try and stop the planet from warming, and it's just the mad world.
It is, and I love that movie. Spencer Tracy, Kick the Bucket.
Yeah, that's I took that for the title of my second book, The Mad World of Climatism, which is a great book for to give your high school kid, because you're getting a very a very one-sided story about climate. They really need to see what the real alternatives are.
Oh man, it is a fantastic book, and I'm urging people to go out and check it out. Go to your website, check out all the things that you have over there, because it's great. I don't want to let you go, but we've got only about 9 minutes left to the show. And I'm lucky my second guest didn't show up, and you sat in like a pro, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
Because I did want to talk to the second guest, because I'm fighting a sales tax here in my county. And as soon as I go off air, I'm rushing out to an hour and a half away to fight with a project manager for the county. So
taxes is another thing. There are people proposing meat taxes. They're proposing them in Europe to cut down meat consumption. There are people that they have now banned advertising of cruise ships in Scotland because they think that's bad for the climate. There are nations that are banning oil and gas advertising. I mean, there's just a lot of crazy things going on right now about all of this, and we still run 95% of our transportation globally on either gasoline or diesel fuel or natural gas. Only about 1% electric right now. It's very, very small. People don't realize that. They think the world's going electric, which is going to take many decades.
It will. And when you talk about trucks that have these electric vehicles, it costs a lot more. The vehicles cost more. Many times the batteries cost more than the vehicles, but the cost of production and the distance they can go compared to a regular diesel or gasoline. I was behind someone coming over the bridge, and they had an electric vehicle, and they did manage to glide over the bridge and stop in the intersection because they ran out of electricity. They're not as reliable as having a gas vehicle. There's so many drawbacks to them. And I'm sorry, you have to go and plug your vehicle in and wait for it to charge up before you can use it. Meanwhile, in the state of an emergency, I can jump in my gasoline-powered vehicle and take off hours before you can. So there's so many downfalls to it. Now you have to produce more electricity to plug in for the electric car. Again, we're taking more into the grid, and the grid can't handle this load.
Yeah, you mentioned electric trucks. That's another example. There are many people. California passed the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, mandating all new trucks be heavy electric trucks. But they can only go, if you charge up an electric truck, it takes you a couple hours, and they can go about 300 miles. You can refuel your diesel truck, your heavy diesel truck, in about 15 minutes, and it can go 1,200 miles. And so it's estimated we're going to need twice as many trucking crews if we went to all electric, twice as many trucks on the road. And then you got to say, well, how's that environmentally friendly to have twice as many trucks out there running around? It doesn't make any sense at all.
What does it do to the roadways? But that
Yep.
amount, because these vehicles are so much more heavier
They're
than
heavier.
using a diesel or gasoline, and then what will do to the roads will have to be replaced every so many years compared to so many decades. So there we go, another transportation tax sale. There we go. Well,
Yep.
we're down to our last few minutes, Steve, and thank you for being a pal and sticking around. It's always fun to have you on the show. Matter of fact, a friend of mine, a former co-host, Michael Farage, said that to say hello. He was up in Michigan, and he was at Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Yes.
I was there also.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Steve, and God bless you for all the hard work you do. People can find you, just your name, SteveGorman.com.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Curtis. Great to join you.
God bless.
All right, Steve.
We're I can't believe he did stick around, and God bless him for doing that. And I mean, I didn't even tell him that he did.
So you're talking about
an
Cool
angel.
Mike?
Yeah, Cool Mike. Yes, Cool Mike was with us. We're going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about J6.
Cool Mike.
And we've got two great guests coming on. Let me pull out my sheet here. It's underneath my clipboard. We are going to have Sarah Maccabee, and Chris Burgard. They're going to be with us. They are people that are involved with the J6. And Jake Lang sent me a message, and maybe I may be able to get him also. It's possible. We'll check on that. But next week's show is going to be about the January 6th political prisoners. What else would you call them? But that's all we got for today. I can't believe what a show. I wanted to bring up Kamala Harris and didn't have a chance to do that. We do have just maybe a minute, but Kamala Harris back in 2019 was saying that she wanted to ban all guns. She wanted to do this gun buyback in California to take all guns away from lawful owners. And now all of a sudden she goes on Oprah Winfrey and say if someone breaks in her house, she'll shoot them. Excuse me. This is the woman, the vice president of the United States running for president, who is anti-gun, who wants to take away your guns, but says if someone breaks into her house, they will be shot. And then when she says this, she goes, oh, my staff will handle that. I mean, flip-flop Kamala. Flip-flop Kamala. Anyway, we'll have fun coming back next week. I want to thank everyone that joined us. And I would say just God bless and have a great week and see you next time. Same bat station, same bat time. Take care.
Take care.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind their lies. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late save America. We have loved and lost, and we still believe in God we trust, in the freedom our forefathers granted us. We know it's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save America.